So, I guess we're making history with the fastest nerf after an update release. Thanks, Hatzegopteryx. I didn't think we'd actually get one faster than patches. Hello! So, Hatz TLC. I know it's, the same case with the Ramp TLC, the people who wanted, updates to playables that haven't had a TLC yet, I know they're disappointed, and I'll say the exact same thing again. Mechanics that aren't ready for the game could possibly be on, future TLC releases that haven't received a TLC yet. And I'll also say the same thing as I did with the Ramp TLC, as they pretty much did kind of the same thing as they did with the Ramp TLC. They took mechanics that were already in the game that all they had to do was just tweak them to actually fit Hatzegopteryx's role, right? And if I'm reading between the lines right here, what this could mean is that the playables in the future that haven't received TLCs, when they receive TLCs, they may come with brand new mechanics that right now probably wouldn't be ready for the game yet. So instead of, adding in whole new mechanics that might not have had enough time for testing and quality assurance and all that good stuff, instead they've just tweaked around, different mechanics already in the game that work, and they just put them on Hatzegopteryx. And with Ramp and Hatz both getting a TLC now, I know everyone is hopeful for the next TLC to be Thalassadromius. To me, I actually hope so as well. That would also mean that the smallest part of the roster, being the Flyers, would all be done with kits. But either way, in this video I'm going to be talking about a bunch of the abilities, some of the stuff I like, some of the stuff I don't like, and yeah, maybe some clips afterwards of my fails, some parts where I did okay, and yeah. If you're looking for anybody to teach you about pro Hatz gameplay and how to do super well with it, this is not going to be the channel. It's just not my kind of playable. I'll just be giving my opinions on it. But with all that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy. So to start off, Hatz is a mutt. But what do I mean by that? Well, Hatz has a lot of mechanics that pretty much are on a bunch of other playables in the game. But I'll end up going over those as I'm talking about the abilities. First, let's start off with the passives. So first off we have Glider, which just came with the flight rework on the Ramp TLC update, and it just allows you to get more distance out of your stamina bar by, instead of pushing forward with either W or your joystick, you can just leave all that go and just let the momentum carry you, allowing you to save some stamina to get more distance. Another bonus to this is that you can actually save some stamina and get some extra height if you find a thermal vent over the ocean. Just sit there and just let the current ride you up for free. Next up we have Strong Jaws, which gives you 12.5% increased bucking resistance, allowing you to do what pretty much you see every Hatz do now, which is pretty much be a grab bot. You run up to something, you grab it, and now it'll be able to get out of your jaws 12.5% slower. Woohoo! What every Rex player wants, but I am praying that Aldron will never give them. So next up, let's get into the head attacks, and what you're seeing here is actually a little deceptive. Peck. A quick peck attack restores a small amount of stamina for every attack you inflict. It deals no damage to grounded targets while flying. Simple enough, it's just a basic run-of-the-mill attack. You hit something, you get a little bit of stamina back, but not in the same way as you used to before with the old peck attack. Before, it used to give you, just a little hit of stamina just instantly. Now, it's more like it gives you increased stamina regen, and you cannot be sprinting to get this stamina regen. So in other words, be careful with your stamina. But you can also use your peck attack while flying, but the caveat here is that you can't do what you used to do before when Hatz first released and just cheese the entire ground roster by pecking them from the air. Also being able to just sustain your stamina infinitely, though you can actually hit other flying targets if you like. Next up we have Peck Barrage, which pretty much works the same as, before. You do 3 hits in quick succession, and it does more damage, the further in the chain of the hits that you go, and, well, it's just a high DPS option. Now here's the part where I said it's a little deceptive with the amount of, head attacks, because here we have Stab, which is a high damage peck, can only be used while grounded, and deals normal and armor-piercing damage, and it ends up counting for 2 hits. and I'm pretty sure it's like a 50-50 split. So let's say you're up against another Hatz and you hit them with stab, then 40 of that damage will be, armor piercing, and then 40 of that damage will be regular damage. So in other words, the armor piercing part will be helpful against any apexes or stuff like that, but then, the raw damage part of that is going to be, well, not as effective. But then, as soon as you're up against something that's smaller than you, then the role's reversed. Then the armor-piercing part is not as useful as the raw damage part, as the raw damage part is going to be doing more damage than the armor-piercing part to anything smaller than you. And I know you all noticed that it ended up saying only usable while grounded, but it can still do tricks like this, activating the ability and then starting flying. So let's get into senses, and we'll start off with Flock Mob. Increase your and all grouped flyers' attack damage by, that is really weird wording, by 10%, and armor by 10% within 50 meters. This stacks up to 2 times, and each group flyer in range will grant you a stack. In other words, you could have 4 Hatz in a group, and 2 of them use Flock Mob, and everyone gets bonus damage and armor. Cool. Next up we have Forceful Blows, 50% increased knockback. It does what it says on the tin. Your abilities that do knockback, they do 50% more. Cool. Now next up, this one's easily the best, but it really annoys me with how loaded it is, especially compared to the others. So, Corpse Stealer. Passively tracks dinosaur carcasses within 250 meters, so we're all crying in the language of Sarah, and also gain 25% eating speed. But we aren't done there. While on the ground, gain 50% increased turn rate and 25% slower hunger drain. But guess what? We're still not done. Eating another player's corpse grants a health recovery boost for 30 seconds and activates only once every 5 minutes. Healing is reduced if bleeding and works through the combat timer. So in other words, it's got a combination of Cerato's Carcass Tracker, and then on top of that, it also has Rex's Ravenous to heal faster, and then again on top of that, it can just turn faster. So my thought is, why would anyone use any of the other options in Sensors? Being able to track down corpses and heal a little bit faster, sure, I would want Cerato to have the ability to have Ravenous in its kit, but the most important part of this is actually just the turn rate. I would say, to give people a reason to actually use the other stuff in terms of Hatz's senses, remove the turn rate boost from Corpse Stealer, and just maybe increase the base turn rate on Hatz. That way, people actually have a reason to use the other sensors. So let's move on to the front limb slot, and first we're starting off with Flail. Thrash in a small area of effect using your wings, dealing damage and pulling flying players towards you. While airborne, deals no damage or knockback to grounded dinosaurs. Any dinosaurs in water latched on / carried by yourself will not be affected, and increases your armor and makes you immune to impact damage while active. Now that's pretty loaded. Some reason, there's so many abilities on Hatz that are so loaded in terms of their descriptions, it's actually wild. Pretty much just think of Spino's Undertow when it's in water. You use it and then it pulls the, anything else in range towards you and does a bit of damage. It is so useful for dealing with ramps. I have killed so many ramps just flying at them, using Flail one time, and then they just die. It actually makes me a little scared to play Ramp right now, just because of the amount of Hatz that are out there playing, because the TLC is so fresh. And just in case that wasn't enough, of course, there's more onto this, that you can completely negate impact damage or collision damage. If the Lacidromius doesn't get something like that for its TLC, I will be pretty disappointed. And so next up we have Barrel Roll. It's kind of the same thing as before. It does a bunch of knockback, it does damage, and the only difference really is you can't hit anything that isn't flying anymore. So no more just doing those, super high speed barrel rolls, cheesing the entire roster on the ground. I will say there's one thing I prefer way more, and that is the animation for it. But now for the ability that had me confused in the Ramp TLC, because it got some really strange visual effects, and that is Wingbeat. This attack deals light damage, scaling with distance, and heavy knockback to all dinos in front of you. Can apply the dazed effect, and deals less damage to carried dinos. Any dinosaur in water latched on or carried by yourself will not be affected. While you're airborne, it deals no damage or knockback to grounded dinosaurs. So in other words, if you're on the ground, you can hit grounded dinos. If you're in the air, you cannot hit grounded dinos. Now, for the first 3 hours and 40 minutes of, after the Hatz release, before they ended up nerfing it, this was insane. It was yeeting Spinos off of cliffs, pretty much bullying anything into a river, ready to get shredded by anything semi-aquatic. And, yeah, it's also bugged. It's also dealing 2 instances of knockback, because, one, you're getting hit by the AoE part of, the actual attack, and if you also end up hitting with the wings as well, you also get affected by that at the same time. But at least the actual visual effect makes sense now, that pretty much they've turned Hatzegopteryx into Kushala Daora from Monster Hunter. And so we'll move on to hides, and here we are Feathery Hide. Build up 1 stack of Feathery Hide every 15 seconds for a maximum of 5 stacks, increasing your armor by 5% per stack. Only builds up while you are not flying, and if you do start flying, it decays very quickly. In other words, it's literally just Struthi's passive Feathery Hide. Or it's the same as Serato's Tough Scoots or Pycno's Tough Scoots, but, just at different values, right? The only thing really making it not better than their versions is the fact that it decays as soon as it starts flying. Otherwise, if it just decided to stay on the ground, it would be just classed as better than what Struthi, Pycno, and Serra have. And so on to the next hide, we have Sky's Shadow. In other words, take 30% less knockback, and you and your group members within 50 meters, if you're flying, you'll take less damage from AoE attacks. Say from, like, another Hatz, or... yeah. But on top of that, because of course, more on top of that, then you take 50% less impact damage, or collision damage. So, say, smashing into a tree without Sky Shadow does a lot more damage to you than it does with Sky Shadow. But then again, why worry about any of that when you can just take Flail? Yeah. So, moving on to the next hide slot, Preened Feathers. We all know Preened Feathers. You fly for 35% longer. Yeah. Let me just say that this right here is at 8 times speed, and with the combination of the new gliding and all of that stuff, you can still pretty much cross almost the entire map. And then when you're low stamina, we can move on to the next ability in the voice slot, Rest Stop. Regenerate 100% of your stamina over 15 seconds. If uninterrupted, your jumping, sprinting, and flying consume no stamina for 5 seconds. The ability locks you in place and cannot be used in combat. Sure, but you can still cancel it, just in case you get attacked. Pretty much by hitting the ability again to cancel it. And combined with Preened Feathers means that you can just cross the map arguably faster than before this TLC now. And it's a 1 minute cooldown. The thing that scares me about that is that your stamina is always going to last longer than that 1 minute cooldown. So this will always be, ready for you to use whenever you want to use it, as long as you're outside of combat. So crossing the map and maybe getting back to where you were killed for a possible revenge kill, it's a little concerning until they end up adding in those matchmaking changes. So next up we have Dazing Bellows, and this is worded a little strangely, but I'll explain afterwards. So Dazing Bellows increases Wingbeat damage by 100%, your area of effect attacks now apply dazed for 120 seconds. While dazed, targets have reduced movement speed by 5% and can't use active abilities. Targets can only be dazed every 40 seconds. So dazed, same as, Spino, same as Patchy, same as Bars Boldia, same as Anodonto. Now, it says dazed for 120 seconds. That means that for 120 seconds or 2 minutes, you can daze someone with your AoE attacks. That doesn't mean that you can hit someone with an AoE attack and they are dazed and can't attack for 2 minutes. And so next up we have Death Croak, a call that can be activated while grounded and within 50 meters of a player's corpse. Provides increased stamina recovery, 20% increased armor, and status healing by 50% for 45 seconds. So let's say you're flying around and on your carcass tracker it says that there's something that you can eat close by. And so you follow the tracker and let's say this shark corpse is, a player's corpse, and then over there's like a Rex or something like that. You land next to the body, you activate Death Croak, and then you get all those lovely buffs for, an upcoming fight. And so last up for the voice calls, Strongbeak. You activate the call, and it cuts the cooldown of Clamp in half, and cuts the stamina cost in half. Just in case you're someone who's not too confident in using it, and, well, it's less punishing if you miss. I kind of ruined the order there, but, you know, Preen Feathers and Rest Stop were too perfect of a combo not to mention right there. So let's move on to the leg slot. Aerial Mastery. While in the air, all aerial attacks will use 20% less stamina and have a reduced cooldown by 25%. Does what it says on the tin. In other words, your flail, your barrel roll, your... yeah, they just use less stamina and have shorter cooldowns. So, if you want to focus on aerial combat a lot, go for it. But next up we have Crash Landing, and I don't think this ability is actually working, but I'll read it out anyway. After landing, increases jump height and reduces sprinting stamina cost by 50% for 10 seconds. Can only be triggered every 60 seconds. Now, I put this on as single player, and I don't know if that really makes a difference or not, but I would, you know, fly for a bit, then I would land, and see if my stamina regen or my jump height actually increases while using it, and it just didn't. It just didn't work. I don't know if it's bugged, or if it isn't working, if I'm doing something wrong. I just couldn't get it to work. But all I could say is, just from the description of it, it seems like something focused towards the whole clamp playstyle. So, you know, you swoop in, you land on the floor really quickly, and then, you know, you go grab a dino, and then you can actually get up into the air better because you end up, you know, jumping higher, so taking off is just easier. I don't know if I'd call it a redundant ability, just because taking off is not really an issue, but I don't know if it's actually working or not. So if it's not working and it eventually gets fixed, anybody who needs it, well, there it is for you. I'd like to ask if anybody in the comments could let me know if it's just not working or if they've gotten it to work for them. I just haven't been able to. As for other changes that came in this patch, well, Kentro ended up getting a change to its turning while it's sprinting. It feels a lot smoother now. It just turns a bit better while sprinting. And then there's also the change to a Kilo, in which it's no longer able to just keep jumping forever. Because before, it could do like 7 or 8, you know, jumps, then stop jumping for maybe 3 seconds, and then do another 7 or 8 jumps, and then just that over and over and over again. It ended up turning a Kilo into like a Swiss Army knife of survival. It was ridiculous. What I'm showing on screen right now is from before the update. I was planning to make something just going like, why is a Kilo so dumb? I was literally going to make a video called, why is a Kilo so dumb right now? Because I would see a Kilos just everywhere. There were so many a Kilos on the EU servers, just every single time I played. I was getting sick of it. They also ended up nerfing some abilities in terms of like damage and stuff like that, but the thing I cared more about was just the fact that all of them would just do this one thing, and that was just spam jumps over and over and over and over. But as for Kentro, it ended up getting a little extra health regen, and then it ended up actually losing some damage in trade-off for, you know, getting better turning while sprinting, which is fair, in my opinion. I would say that's completely fair. Its main weakness is still, you know, not paying attention and then getting grabbed by a Sarko or a Rex, and then, well, you know that song and dance. It's not really much of a dance. There's definitely a song to it, though, and it's Sounds of Pain. No matter how many times it happens, it always feels bad getting grabbed, but that's just the ability for you. I don't think there's any way to actually make it feel like, you know, like a good thing. You know, someone's grabbed you, you've got zero agency now, and it's all in, you know, it's all in the person doing the grabbing. It's all up to them to either do it right or mess up whether you survive or not. And as much as it sucks to be grabbed, that is just the nature of the ability, and I guess that's fine. It just sucks whenever you're playing something like a Conk, and then you come across a Rex and it runs to the water, but in the water then there's also a Sarko, and then, you know, to top it all off, you know, there's like a Hatz flying around waiting for you to, you know, just not be paying attention to grab you. And then at that point, you're pretty much facing every form of clamp in the game, right? And what can you do about it? Nothing. That's just the tension of playing 2 slots at the moment right now, though, is that anything with Clamp is pretty damn popular right now, especially Hatz. Well, of course Hatz, because brand new TLC. But I ended up playing Kentro, in this clip. I was playing for about 2.5 hours, just Kentro. The only kills I saw, other than, what you just saw on screen right there, the only other kills I saw were all just grab kills from, Hatz or Sarkos for 2.5 hours. No actual fights, no nothing. It was literally just clamp, kill, whether it was a Sarko or a Hatz or a Rex. Yeah, it's very popular right now. So for the most part, there's not much for me to say about this patch. Nothing will really change until we actually get gameplay changes. As usual, it's just a balance patch like, the past 9 patches. And yeah, Hatz is in a good spot. It could use a couple of changes. I already spoke about them in, when I was talking about the abilities, just to add a little bit more variety in what the players actually choose to use with Hatz. I'm a little worried about trying out Ramp in this update, but it is what it is. But to finish up the video, I think I'm just going to throw in any clips that I found entertaining or interesting, or funny kill, or funny death, perhaps, whatever, yeah, no commentary or anything like that. And then the usual, outro of just making the thumbnail, in which, Alderon, please, fix replay mode, I beg of you. But yeah, let's get on to that, shall we? And so here we are at the end. So, let me know. Are you enjoying the Hatz TLC? Is there anything else that you would like to see changed? Or are you of the same mind as me that all we really need is just something to change up the gameplay loop? I keep repeating myself, and I hate saying it, but I don't want to just glaze the game as I've said in the past. Because as you're watching in the replay right here, look at all those people just over in Grand Plains. And if anything, you could say I'm part of the problem in what you're watching on the screen right here with all these people over in Grand Plains, because hey, I'm contributing right here. But on a side note, we've all heard about like the 200 player servers, right? And I'm curious, I'm curious what would happen in terms of just having those 200 player servers. Would people spread out a bit more, or do you think that it would just be double the amount of people in the same like 3 zones, right? So like Green Valley, Grand Plains, and then maybe Salt Flats. And along with that, how do you think you'd be able to no, actually, I shouldn't say how would you stop it, but how would you encourage players to move around? Reason I say encourage instead of stop, because if you try to stop a player from doing something, they're gonna just want to do it more. But if you encourage them to do something else, then, you know, they don't even think about, you know, trying to go against the grain, right? It's a really messy topic to talk about, because it's like you want to keep player agency in the game, and you don't want to restrict them too much, but you also want them to actually, you know, experience more of the game. Though it may be a bit earlier for me to say to experience more of the game, since there's only really one thing in the game right now, which is PvP, which is the only reason why everyone just goes to those same 3 spots on the map to get that one thing that this game has right now. It's a bit early. I guess I should wait a little bit before asking that. Oh well, I guess there's a little bit of food for thought, but how would you encourage people to spread out? Have you got any ideas? I'd love to know. But either way, I've rambled on long enough. All in all, without sounding like a broken record, Hatz is cool. Of course there's changes that could be made, but yeah. In terms of the balance, you know, towards Kentro and Akilo and some other stuff, yeah, that sounds fine to me. It's nothing too egregious. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye!